Hi, so this week's response is for journal response number 4, and that's social studies and children's literature. This chapter really talked a lot about just ideas in your classroom that you could incorporate children's literature for using in teaching social studies. It's chapter 10, so that's mainly what I focused all my important points on. They're really more just like important ideas I think would be good for my future classroom. So the first one I'm going to talk about is becoming the character with a character journal. And the whole idea of this is that students, when reading their nonfiction or fictional historical book, they pick one main character out, and that's the character that they sort of become. And at the end of each chapter, they take their character journal and they write a recap or the character's thoughts or feelings on what happened in that chapter in a letter type form. It's almost like more of a diary than a journal. But sometimes when you say diary, the boy students might be like, I don't really want to do that. So calling it a journal, I think, actually really helps more. And I think this is a really awesome idea and something that I would use in my classroom as a future teacher, because it really shows you the thinking that students have throughout the story. They're having to recap and write down their thoughts as they're going. They're not waiting until the end of the book to write us a recap or a summary of the story. We're really seeing that they're understanding the characters' feelings and the events that are going on in each chapter, and they're being critical thinkers. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to have them doing. The second important point is creating the USA map, a historical adventure across the USA, which I think is super awesome and would be something that you could show to parents at parent-teacher conferences or even post out in your hallway that other students and teachers could see as they walk by, just like what your class has been learning about. And that's whenever you get a giant USA map, and as the students read historical fiction, historical nonfiction stories, they can create their own symbols that represent that story, or they could do the book title, a picture of the book, and they go up and they post it on your map. And you could have ones that you get every year if you find a good deal maybe on maps somewhere as a teacher, and have them glue it on there even and create this huge class mural of just the stories of different historical adventures that they have gone on through reading. And then everybody else could see like, oh, well, I read this book and it was over here in the West, and it went from the West and it went north and all of these different things. And at the end of the year, we just have this huge recap, and we can have a big talk, a big conference about it with our students, about just the different adventures and things that they went through and what they saw when they were there, and based on the time period of their book, how it was different from somebody else's experience when they were reading a book in that area. So I think that would be a really great idea. And how I mentioned before, showing it to parents at parent-teacher conferences, showing it to other teachers, letting other students see like, oh, look at this awesome adventure our class went on. Like, you can go on your own adventure too, reading historical fiction throughout the USA. So I think that one's a really good point too. The last important point that I came across was turning our learners into bio experts. And I know that we have our students focus more on biographies. Some people say it's more of like a second grade, third grade kind of thing is whenever we introduce it to our students. But typically we're just having them read one short biography book, and they're writing a short thing about the person that they looked up, the important figure, and then that's kind of it. Or they could do a poem on them, and those are really great ideas. But I think that if we want them to become bio experts, gathering several biographies about this person and several books that explain the events in their life that are nonfiction, and having our students read them and then compare them to the other books by different authors is something that's really important, because sometimes details are left out and sometimes details are explained different. And if we can become critical thinkers and be able to differentiate between this book and another book and what actually happened and the facts that I've already personally learned about my historical figure, I think that creating that kind of atmosphere in the classroom is really important, because it allows our students to think deeper and gives them a chance to really explore the different types of books that are available to them. So as a teacher, I would definitely use that. I would definitely make sure that I chose historical figures that I know there's going to be several biographies on. I want to make sure that my students have a wide variety of choice and they choose somebody that they're actually interested in. But I also want to make sure whenever we go to the library or we look at our class library, that my students aren't getting stuck and getting disappointed that they really want to do this figure, but there's not books available for them. So as a teacher, that's my responsibility to make sure that there is those types of books and there is 2 to 3 to 4 books, depending on what you make the requirement in order for them to do. But that is the recap of this week's journal response, and I will put my questions on the paper so you can see them. Thanks.